All right, so uh, we'll start with pages. And so pages on your website are designed to be kind of a more static landing place, something that is not going to change as you add new stories. And really, it's something that you're not going to want to be updating too often. It's kind of a place where you can provide some information and then kind of leave it alone. So a couple of examples there are the about page. We start everybody out with an about page on their website. And so it's going to be automatically linked in your navigation menu here. And it does come with just this placeholder text. Use this about page to include some information about your publication. If you are logged into your website and you have the proper permissions, so that would be your students if they are an editor level or higher on the website, they'll see this option up here to edit the page. So if you click into that, you can edit the page, update the information there. You can use SNO story elements or add images just like you would when creating a story. So certainly feel free to update those pages as you would like. Again, to begin with, we start everybody out with just the about page. And then some people choose to add things like editorial policy. Um, they embed forms to submit a letter to the editor, just different things like that. So if you want to add a new page to your website from your dashboard, you just go to the Pages tab here. You can click the All Pages button there and see all the pages that are currently on your site. So definitely, if you've inherited the site, you might want to go through and just make sure that there are no sites that are no longer relevant. So for example, here I've got two sports pages. So I've looked at these before our webinar here. I know that this one with the exclamation point isn't necessary anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the trash button to get rid of that. So any pages that are no longer relevant, you no longer need, feel free to clear those out so you can kind of keep this cleaned up here. To add a new page, you can either click the Add New Page button right there or right up here, and then just give that page a title and add your content to the page right there. So that's how you can create a new page. You do see a box over here on the right for some page attributes. Generally, if you're just creating a new page that's going to display some static information, maybe you want to make a page about the awards that your publication has earned, uh, just leave this using the default template or the full width template. Default is going to run a sidebar on the right side of that page using whatever content appears on any of your stories that also use the single sidebar template. So using my demo site here, if I look at one of my stories that has the single sidebar, mine would just contain trending stories and the advertisement widget there. We do have other webinars that talk about widgets and how you can customize the content then that goes in that sidebar. So you can certainly refer to those. If you select the full width template, it's going to run the content on the page without any sidebar. So if you just want to focus on the content of the page, you may select that template. Everything else is going to be kind of tied to something specific. So don't select any of those other templates there. That's getting into kind of some extra content that really we don't need to worry about for the sake of what we're covering in this webinar. And that would be creating new pages to display additional information. Stick to either the default or full width template. So with that in mind, once you've created that page, it is all set. I will say though, when you create a new page or a new category, those will not automatically appear in your navigation menu. In order to add those, you need to edit your navigation menu. So that's not something we're covering in today's webinar, but my colleague Andrea did cover that in her webinar this morning. So again, I'll drop this in for those of you who have arrived late. This support article contains links and passcodes to our webinars, and they are kept up to date with the most current information. So there is one you can find on there about editing your menu, editing the navigation menu somewhere on here. So I'm going to guess it's covered in this menu creation, design, and placement webinar. So you can get the information on how to add those new pages and categories in that webinar. So that's pretty much everything about pages. So most of the time, what we see is people are wanting to create different categories where they're going to place stories. By default, you might only have something like news, features, sports, entertainment, and opinion. So maybe you wanted to create a new story category about, let's say, student council. So to do that, that is in the Stories tab on your dashboard. And then you can go to the Story Categories button there. And then it's pretty straightforward here. Create a new category. So we would call that one Student Council. If you leave this blank, the site will automatically generate a slug. A slug is just the URL version of the name. So when people go to one of the category pages, the slug is that little language that appears after your site's URL /category/, and that's where you'll see that slug for that category. So if you wanted to customize that, you can, but if you leave it alone, the site will automatically adjust that, and you'll easily be able to add it onto your menu or any place else you need, because you'll just be seeing the name of the category on the back end. So then we'll go ahead and we can add that, and you'll see that is now a new category. So if I go to adding a story and I'm working on that, that new category does appear as selectable there in my story list. I will kind of reiterate what I've already touched on here with the pages, in that when you create a new category, it doesn't automatically appear in your navigation menu, so you would need to add it there. Nor do new categories automatically appear as a widget or one of these blocks of content on your homepage. So then you would need to get into some of the site design work. And again, we have webinars on those and support articles on how to add and adjust widgets, but you would want to probably set up a widget to display that new category and pull in those stories that you're adding to that category if it's something you're going to be customizing regularly. Couple other things about categories is you can create subcategories. So the way that would work is I'll just make another subcategory here under my new category, my very uniquely named category there. So we'll call it subcategory 3, and then I would select new category as the parent category. So what this does for you on the site is that subcategory is going to be available in my categories list here, and it's pretty clear it's a subcategory. It kind of indents it under the parent category there. So if I categorize something in a child category, in this case subcategory 3, it will display those stories in that specific subcategory, but also in the parent category. So better example here, I've got several subcategories under news. So if I added a story to that Drake news category, then when somebody goes to the news page, they are going to see any stories categorized in news or in Drake, general, local, or national. Those will all get pulled into this category page. Same with the widget. All those child categories are going to populate in that parent category as well. So that's how those work. Again, if you wanted to add any of those drop downs in the navigation menu, please refer to the webinar or support article on editing the navigation menus. That being said, you can as you can see, my categories on my demo site are getting a little out of hand here, especially when you're dealing with new staff members all the time. It's a lot to take in how to add a story and making sure that we customize it, in the right place or categorize it in the right place. So you may actually want to go through and look at your categories and see if they're still relevant, still needed. So a couple things you can do if you wanted to clean up your categories is look at the list here, and then you've got this far right column that says count. And that lets you know how many stories are in that particular category. So if I'm, a new advisor this year and I just inherited the site, I'm looking through my category list here and I see that in this review subcategory under A&E, somebody created that category, but nobody's actually added any stories in there. So that's easy enough. I'm just going to delete that one. No need to worry about it. I'm not losing any stories there because there were no stories in there. And now when I go to create a story, my category list here will be a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to navigate. But if I'm looking at something like my subcategories here and the new category, maybe I decide I don't need, this whole thing anymore. So I want to get rid of the new category and all these subcategories. What I first want to do is make sure that any stories currently categorized in the category I want to delete are recategorized or at least currently categorized in at least one other category that I plan to keep. So to check that, I can actually click that number in the count column, and it's going to show me all of the stories that are in that category. So I can see here, I've got these 3 stories, and they are already in the features category as well as those categories I plan to delete. That's great. That's not a problem. I could actually go back and delete that category right now. But let's say, for example, they weren't in this features category. So I would want to just make sure to recategorize them. Again, let's say they're news stories. So I could go into bulk actions after selecting all the stories I want to recategorize, click edit, click the apply button there, and then I get this look here and it shows me all the categories. So I can deselect the categories I know I'm planning to delete and add them to the category I want to move them to. Once I update that, then we are all set there. We've got no stories in there. So if I go back to my categories, I now see that new category and all those subcategories are now empty. So I can just select all of those, delete the category, and now it's a little bit cleaner. Again, if I refresh my story editor, my list is just a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to manage from the staff standpoint. If I accidentally delete a category that has some stories in it, those stories aren't categorized anywhere else, those stories won't be deleted from the site. They instead will just fall into this uncategorized category. The problem with that is there's not a way to link to uncategorized in your navigation menu or in the widgets. So the only way for people to find uncategorized stories would be to know a word in the headline and search that term in my search bar. So that's why recategorizing those stories before you delete them is very important. So that's how you can add categories, how the child categories work in relation to those parent categories, and how you can clean up your categories, delete any that maybe have no stories in there. And that is kind of how categories and pages work on your site. Does anybody have any questions, anything about the categories and pages that's unclear or that you'd like me to go over a little more in detail? If you do, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. Otherwise, think that's kind of the basics behind categories and pages. So that's all I've got for you here this afternoon. So thanks for joining me, and we hope to see you at some future SNO webinars.